Welcome back to Tanya in 5. The last few days we've been studying Chapter 3 of Book 2 of Tanya. In Chapter 1 we established that our world and all of existence is dependent on the continuous investure of God to create our world via the holy language, the holy words of Torah as described in the book of Genesis. In Chapter 2, we explained that considering that our world is something from nothing, then in reality, our world should revert back to its original state, which is nothing. It is only that there's an external force, the divine energy, that keeps it in existence. And thus, even while it is a something, even while our world exists, it is inherently a nothing being propelled into existence by divine energy. In Chapter 3 now, the Alter Rebbe takes this logic to the next level. If our world is continuously dependent on the divine energy invested in it to create it, that means, in essence, we are in the same space as our source. The divine energy is here and now bringing us into being. So, we are within the same space of our source, the divine word, the divine energy that keeps us in existence. Now the rule is that anything that is within its source has no independence and is really of completely subsumed and surrendered within its source. By way of analogy, the rays of the sun that we experience here on earth are certainly an independent existence. We certainly understand that the rays of sun that we experience here are dependent upon the sun, but they are nonetheless still independent. The reason they're independent is because the rays of sun are here, and the sun, its source, is miles and miles away in the sky. So we have two existences, the source, the sun, the rays that are here on this earth, and one, the rays, are dependent on the other, the sun, the source. But what about that ray of light before it exits the sun? It certainly exists. The sun itself contains within it the potential for all the rays it will ever produce. But could we say that the ray of sun before it exits the sun has some independent reality? It's not as if the ray of sun inside the sun is dependent on the sun. It's not an individualistic existence at all. It is nothing other than its source, the sun. In other words, in the sun, there's nothing other than sun. Everything that's in there, all the potential rays that will ever come out, aren't independent, they're nothing other than the sun. Why? Because it's in its source. When the ray of sun is in its source, the sun, it does not have any individual reality or existence. It is simply the sun itself. The same thing holds true of divine investure in creation. If the divine energy, the Word of God, is continuously here and now present in our world, bringing it into being, then that means our entire existence is really within its source, the Word of God. And if it is within its source, the Word of God, it has no independence. It's not even an existence that's dependent on God to create. No. It is nothing other than its source itself. Just like the ray of sun is nothing other than the sun before it exits the sun. So whilst our world is continuously brought into being by the divine energy that's here and now, we are within our source, and thus we really are of nothing other than the source itself, the divine energy that brings us into being. It's only that from our perspective, we do not see that divine energy. So to us, we seem like the ray of sun that's miles away from the sun. We seem like an independent existence that's dependent on God. Maybe we can see that we exist dependent on God, like the ray of sun dependent on the sun. But in reality, the divine energy that we are dependent on is right here. So we are within our source. We are within the divine energy, and therefore we are of zero independence. We have no individualistic identity. We are subsumed within the truth of divine energy that brings us into being here and now. The Alter Rebbe concludes this chapter with a question. If this is the case, then why do we feel independent? Why indeed don't we see the divine energy? Surely, if God is here, we should be seeing His energy and we should be completely nullified to this energy. So why do we feel independent? The answer to that question comes in the next chapter. Now the takeaway from all of this is, Hasidim say that when one studies philosophy about God, one should not go to sleep with a question. If one goes to sleep with a question, the question percolates and it can, God forbid, cause doubts about the nature of God. Better go to sleep after you have the explanation well understood and well grasped. But this question that the Alter Rebbe asks, why aren't we independent? Why are we not surrendered unto God? That's a question you could sleep on. We should sleep on this. Why do we insist on our independence? Why do we insist on living our individualistic lives when in reality we should be completely surrendered and subsumed within the truth of God's bringing us into being every moment right here, right now? Looking forward to seeing you when we conclude chapter 4.